I'll go ahead and just get us started a little bit. First couple minutes here. My name is Christine Curry, and I am the Iowa Outreach Coordinator of the Izaak Walton League's Upper Mississippi River Initiative, known as UMRI. And welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time to come in and gather with us this evening. I know you have probably a million other choices, and we are very much appreciative of you being with us. So welcome to our 2022 series on soil and water conservation, Thinking Like a Watershed program. The monthly presentations are jointly hosted with our Izaak Walton League colleagues of the Upper Mississippi River Initiative. Co-hosts include Panora Conservation Chapter member Chris Henning and Des Moines Chapter's Communication Director Bud Hartley. And thank you for joining us this evening for another extraordinary presentation. Stream TEAM Science is slowly shifting policy. How E. coli and DNA data changed Mower County septic system practices. This evening, we have a discussion with leaders Larry Dolphin, Bill Buckley, Mark Owens, lifetime members of the Izaak Walton League, and Josh Balk from the Iowa Department of Natural Resources here in Iowa, in Cedar Falls. 500 water samples, a specialty lab, and 40 volunteers confirmed in 2017 that untreated human effluent, as well as hog and cattle manure, are contributing to E. coli health threats in headwaters of the Cedar River watershed in south central Minnesota. One outcome is slow but steady septic system ordinance rewrite and Mower County. 3 Izaak Walton Leagues. Do we have, can somebody mute? I think we've got, somebody needs to mute. Okay, thanks. 3 Izaak Walton League members who led both the discovery and the push for change will catch us up on their ongoing work with county staff and discuss the power of data wherever you live. They will be joined by Josh, and he will update us on the fecal data points and collected data from last summer during a cross-state Cedar River watershed project. And this evening, we have our host, our facilitator, and that is Caroline. Thank you, Caroline.
All right. God, you know, I wear bifocals and they're so irritating in this land of Zoom calls because they're never where I need them to be. All right. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Caroline Van Schaken. I'm Christine's colleague north of the Iowa-Minnesota border. We farm in the Driftless region of Minnesota. And like her, I also work with the Upper Mississippi River Initiative, which is a program of the Izaak Walton League based in Minnesota. It turns out, although we work in sometimes 3, sometimes 4 states. We thought that in this season where the Mississippi River just got landed on the American Rivers Endangered List, that we would bring you a more positive story of change unfolding in Mower County in south central Minnesota. And so 3 of our guests are from the Austin, Minnesota area, and our 4th guest is from the southern reach of that same Cedar River watershed. Our goal is to really try to illustrate an ongoing, slow but steady success story connecting sound data with septic compliance, septic system ordinance rewrites, and related positive outcomes for our public waters. All of us know in whatever our capacity that work is pretty challenging. The rigor of the data is essential. Having a good tone of voice at every meeting is important. Being in it for the long haul is imperative. I want to introduce all 4 of our guests, and then I'm going to tell you quickly that we're using a slightly different format tonight. I'm going to ask some questions. They're not surprise questions. Our 4 folks have we've been working on this for a long time, and so this is going to be more of a kind of a dialogue for all of us. And I will try to stay out of the way. And a reminder to you all to please put your questions in the chat box and don't let us forget them, so that if you are not hearing your question asked by primarily Chris Henning after we've done our program, then get your hand up, unmute yourself, and get that question out there. So without further ado, I'm going to start with our Iowa colleague, Josh Balk. Josh, can you wave a little bit? Hello, there you go. Josh is with the Iowa DNR, spent a number of years with Iowa Soil and Water Conservation Districts. He's primarily involved in urban conservation, and he comes to us in Minnesota primarily because he came forward last summer and participated in a Cedar River Watershed, Iowa project that our three Austin guests facilitated, trained, etc. I'm Mary Ellen. That's Josh, welcome. Let's see, so then we have our three guests who are all sitting under the Mark Owens headline there. Let me start with Mark himself. Mark, can you wave for a moment there? There you go.
And Caroline, as far as the recording goes, they won't be able to see them, only if they talk.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
just
right.
FYI.
Okay, good. So Mark is the current president of the Austin chapter of the Izaak Walton League. He's a 40-some year member of Ike's. Austin, I don't know if you're native, Mark, but you've certainly been there a really long time and is a builder. Sitting next to him, day one. All right, there you go. Sitting next to him, which you guys can see, but our recording people can't, is Larry Dolphin, and next to him is Bill Buckley. And Larry and Bill were co-leaders of the sampling project that got this whole process going back in 2017 and 2018. Larry spent 30-some years working with junior high kids at the Hormel Nature Center doing water sampling and monitoring of all stripes, active with the Ikes at both the state presidency level and the Austin chapter presidency level, active Audubon fellow birder. Bill Buckley next to him, a longtime member of the Ikes, I think since 2008, you told me, and spent his career in terms of decades involved with environmental health, wells and septic system inspections, and supervisor with the Mower County Environmental Services Department. So you can see what kind of expertise they brought to this project, which was a volunteer project through the Izaak Walton League. So with that, a reminder about putting your questions in your chat box. I want to ask, and we'll start with Austin, can you guys set us up on the state of the Cedar River in 2017? What brought you to paying attention to the river? I'm going to say the big H for Hormel word. And then Josh, I'll ask you to do the same thing in your neck of the woods. So Mark or Larry.
I'm going to defer to Bill because
okay. Yeah, I've worked with water quality in Austin and on the Cedar River basically since 1974, and I've seen the river get worse and maybe a little bit better, but in 2017 it was still impaired for fecal coliform bacteria and or E. coli, as well as transparency. I think those were the two. Some things have been corrected. The city has put a lot of money into the sewage treatment plant, and I think we all realize that the problem was basically in the rural area at that point. And so we designed our program to specifically look at rural homes, feedlots. Yes. And we, our main focus was on coliform bacteria, E. coli.
We also did turbidity, and I think one of the things that kind of a long time ago, I'll be brief on this, but a long time ago, we had the non-point source water pollution project in Austin back in started in 89, and the kids were involved, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and there was these modules built, 17 of them focused on non-point source water pollution in the state of Minnesota, and it was kind of a new light for me coming from Wisconsin. I noticed Bob Ryan here. I know him pretty well from Iowa, so because I was a naturalist in Iowa. But anyway, it was we were discovering that we do the pH, temperature, dissolved oxygen, and nitrates, nitrites, and all of that. But and we used the macroinvertebrate kick sampling method that the national organization had put together. I think it was her name was Firehawk or something, and so we used that, and we were collecting the data, macroinvertebrates. We found our streams. Dobbins Creek, which runs through the nature center, was definitely medium as far as what we were finding. If we found a stonefly nymph, which in 28 years I found one, I got really excited. I told our kids we'd give them a lot of money if they found another one, but that, of course, I could say that's not a stonefly nymph. But anyway, but and then, well, okay, what do we okay, can we do something with this data they're collecting? Well, it seemed like the impaired waters, E. coli was a possible way to do the plate sampling with septic compliance so that really started in 2010 with those kids, and then eventually somehow, I don't know how we got this to be the Cedar River pilot, but for this project through UMRI, but somehow we did, and we were up at Dave Zentner's house, and we said yes. I said yes, and then I take it back to our chapter, and they all said yes, and so we weren't quite sure what we were getting into, but there was a lot of passion going on regarding the work that would be before us, and hopefully improving the water quality on the Cedar River. So as far as improvements, I know last year they did.
Wait, stop.
125.
Okay. Hang on there, Larry. Could one of you guys, for the Iowa folks who don't understand just exactly what Mower County means in relation to Hormel, and Bill, your comment about E. coli, both of you, could one of you just briefly explain the relation between where you live and Hormel and E. coli? Not just human E. coli, but any kind of E. coli.
I live right on Rose Creek, which flows through the property, and that was one of the streams that we did sampling on, and we certainly discovered issues with E. coli bacteria on Rose Creek, and we did some genetic testing on Rose Creek, didn't we? So we sent that in, and I believe there was definitely human, cattle, I think even swine in that sample. And so we we were moving. You may have noticed we did 83 sites, but we started out with, I think, either 25 or 26. And we started moving upstream to try to find potential source of pollution, or non-point source, but actually if you find it, it's point source, right? So anyway,
Right.
so anyway, that's my, the stream that goes by my property,
And the county itself is rural, it's row crop, livestock. What's the landscape look like?
Yeah, it's primarily corn and beans. You find a hay hayfield and pastures, you know, a little bit of small grain, but not much. So in the spring and the fall and the winter, a lot of bare ground, That's really what contributes to the problem with the clarity of the water.
And the nitrates that we're sending down to Iowa. I know they've done some studies, I believe. Is it Dr. Jones, I believe. So anyway, from University of Iowa, and indicates we are sending plenty of fertilizer down your way in that regard. So,
But the interesting thing, I guess, is that Hormel, well, it's a mile from here, and they kill what, 20,000 a day hogs.
Mhm.
Most of those are brought in from out of county. So the manure that's developed in Mower County doesn't end up in the connection to Hormel's. So we need to work further out, I guess, is what it boils down to.
you know, and Bill mentioned, you know, bare ground, and you know, they're working on cover crops, but it's still a low percentage of cover crops in Mower County. You know, it's increasing, but we have a long ways to go. I know Dave Zenner too has been down talking to the Hormel company and with a couple of us and trying to see how they might get involved with providing more cover crops on the land to keep the nutrients on the land and slow the water down. So.
All right, so that's a really nice segue to Josh, since you're getting all these nutrients from the upper reaches of the Cedar River watershed. What does it look like down in your neck of the woods then? And just set the stage for us, what your land looks like and the landscape and the state of the Cedar right now.
Yes, so the Cedar River, you know, runs through several large communities in Iowa. Waterloo and Cedar Falls, which is where I call home, as well as Cedar Rapids, cuts right through the communities there. But then, yes, I'll say largely row crop agriculture, corn and soybeans. They're forested areas and areas of protection, but there are many segments of the Cedar River that do have water quality impairment designations. And the most common impairment designation is for E. coli bacteria, higher levels than the state standards allows. And so, you know, with that, you know, there is a lot of focus on nutrients and E. coli that's getting into the stream. And I would say it's probably a very large focus on it by the community of Cedar Rapids. They draw their well or their drinking water for the community from alluvial river influenced wells. And so not directly from the river, but the river does impact where these well locations. So there's been lots of focus and emphasis on improving water quality in the Cedar River for not only for the health of the stream, but for the health of the communities that live in and around it.
All right, super. Let's go back to the Austin folks. You started to tell us a little bit about the project that you sort of created, fell into, and designed in 2017. And can you talk to us a little more about it, and how you set up your volunteers, and where did the protocol, I mean, how did you know what to do? You talked about genetic sampling. What does that mean? I mean, we call that DNA, but can you just walk us through a little bit about how you laid out that project and why you chose the sites that you did, and a little bit about that, so we can kind of get our arms around just how you came up with 500 data points in a summer.
Yeah. Well, we had 4 teams, at least 2 on each team. We had one team that we tried to incorporate youth in the collection. We had one team that was 4-H leader, and so he was certified to do that. So he brought in consistently over the whole sampling project, students and parents, and so they had basically 6 locations to sample. It usually took about 2 hours, and each team, generally that was the case, and we E. coli plates with the pipette, and these what the plates look like, and 1 milliliter pipette, and then we also measured turbidity, and used the Secchi tube to do that. And of course, usually when we had really dirty water, we had usually a big rainfall event that occurred, and that seemed to be the time where, of course, we would get the biggest flushing of E. coli in our samples. And so 4 teams from about late June through into early October sampled once a week, and then if there was major rain events, we would go out and try to capture those as well, especially, of course, right after the rain had fallen, and collect the samples. So, and then if we got high enough numbers with the plates, there was a level, what's that level, Bill? 10, well, Carolyn knows it too, but we had to send, there had to be enough E. coli in order to justify sending it, because the genetic testing is very expensive. And so, and we went out to, we had to have high numbers to be able to send something in for genetic testing. So
Well, we had enough money basically to do 9 or 10 sites at three genetic tests per site. And so we sampled with the intention of getting high bacteria levels. In other words, we would sample, and we started out with 25 sites. And then, as Don Arnosti called us, we were E. coli detectives, or sewer detectives. And we started going up the smaller streams and the tributaries. And so that's how we got so many sampling sites. We would drop off some of them where we weren't getting results. And, you know, we needed, Larry mentioned 10, I think. We started out sending in samples, and we were told that we were not getting enough bacteria, or as the lab called them, bacterioids, for the genetic testing. Our samples were coming back either non-detect, or there wasn't enough material, genetic material in there. They could tell there was E. coli present. They just couldn't tell us what it was and how much it was. And remember, we were trying to identify human, swine, and cattle. Those were the 3 that we were paying for, because we felt that those were the ones that we could do something about, and probably the most prevalent in the stream.
You know, that on E. coli plate, it'd be like 10 blue dots, and needed in order to maybe do genetic testing. And so this would go into an incubator for 48 hours, and then we would look at them at that time. Of course, they were labeled the date and time and site location, and then we would count the dots, and Actually, you know, it was very basic, pretty easy to do. The biggest thing about collecting these samples is just make sure you don't contaminate your sample. And so to avoid doing that. So, so we had 10 times, sometimes 20 times, sometimes 30 times, sometimes 40 times the actual acceptable standard in the state of Minnesota or in the state of Iowa. And so that is a lot. So they have that much. So those sites definitely got, more often than not, got hit by genetic testing by us. And of course, we had, unlike Josh, he had a drought year to do, and probably less flushing. And we had two, you know, every time there, just about every week, there was a major rain event. And in 2017, we also did, especially Bill did sampling in 2018 as well, particularly on Dobbins Creek again. And so that's, yeah, that's, so we're in 2008, so it's already 2022. So, and COVID had an impact, and certainly had an impact because they were right when they were going to approve the septic compliance ordinance. COVID hit, their commissioners couldn't get together. So they did approve it eventually, but it was like, and it was an upgrade, definitely an upgrade. And Mark can talk a little bit of 2 years later, but if you don't mind, Mark can talk about that right now.
Actually, could we just jump to Josh for a minute so that he can speak for a moment about the sampling project that he did last summer with you guys training? And then Mark will come back and we'll jump right in with you, and you can speak about where the septic ordinance is now and how the heck you guys got it to where you are. But Josh, catch us up on or explain to us how you got in cahoots with these guys and what you did about it last summer, and what you found in your own portion of the watershed.
Well, yeah, getting into cahoots is a perfect way to describe it. You know, I was contacted. I think there was just kind of a general request asking for folks involved with the Cedar River water quality along any of the stretch of Iowa, and kind of just, you know, a solicitation for partnership looking at E. coli. And so with my work, I've been involved with the Dry Run Creek Watershed Improvement Project for 7 years now, which is a tributary that drains directly into the Cedar River. I've also had involvement with other water quality projects throughout the entire Cedar River stretch in Iowa. And so getting that request seemed like a wonderful partnership to get involved with. And so we've coordinated a meeting to try and discuss about what the intent was, what our focus was going to be. And so, you know, having outsiders from Minnesota come on down to the Cedar Valley area and kind of just talk about what their initiative had involved, and looking to replicate it here on the Iowa side to try and get a better picture of what was going on in the Cedar River. So I was myself kind of focused on the Black Hawk County portion of it. And we had a few folks upstream and downstream from us that were also involved with water quality, looking to get involved. And so we tried setting up the protocol parameters of looking at collecting E. coli samples. And then, yeah, the results were high enough to justify sending in a sample for the DNA microbial source tracking. And so my task was to try and identify potential sites here in the Black Hawk County that would provide, you know, ease of access to sample from, but then also a good representation. So the 6 sites I selected were one at the upstream side of the Cedar River as it comes into Black Hawk County, and then one on the lower side of the Cedar River. And then also identified 3 sites within the Dry Run Creek watershed. and then included one other tributary of the Cedar River with the Black Hawk Creek, which is 200,000 acre watershed that also has an E. coli impairment. And so utilizing those sites, you know, kind of set up the protocol parameters of going out as much as we could to sample. But yep, kind of as you alluded here, it unfortunately ended up being a drought year when we were trying to kick off this program. And so we didn't have many flushing events to capture high concentrations of E. coli. And we were kind of working maybe with a couple different dynamics with the Cedar River and Black Hawk Creek being very large watersheds, you know, that flushing being delayed a little bit. Whereas Dry Run Creek is a smaller, you know, 15,000 acre watershed that is very flashy and very responsive to rain events. And so, you know, coordinating the timing to collect samples and analyze them was a delicate balance, and yep, unfortunately, in a drought year, did not lead as many results as what we were originally hoping for.
And what did you find, Josh, both in terms of E. coli and the DNA samples, which you were able to send some in after all, despite the drought?
Yes, that's correct. So the sites within the Dry Run Creek watershed, we did have consistently high E. coli results. So we sent in several samples to be analyzed for the microbial source tracking. And we did find that 2 of the sites within the Dry Run Creek watershed did test positive for human sourced bacteria. And so that was a very big revelation. Throughout the 17 years that there's been a watershed improvement project on Dry Run Creek, trying to get to the source of where our E. coli from has been an ongoing effort. But you know, we tried looking at some low cost ways of doing that. Some involved doing reflectivity results, looking for detergents and synthetics within the water to try and be indicative. But I would say having this microbial source tracking was a direct way of knowing where these bacteria is coming from. And so, like I said, yeah, having 2 of our sites within Dry Run Creek being human sourced E. coli was very big for us.
And
So a question, I'm sorry, Carolyn, there were a question that might fit right here of if you, Josh, if you went to people and asked to test, or if these were places where you didn't have to talk to landowners where you were testing.
Yes, and so I guess, yeah, part of the selection that I did was sampling from bridge locations, so publicly accessible areas where we did not have to get landowner approval. I think that was just a way of curtailing any issues with that, and also it's much easier to have to sample from a bridge location when you're able to just pull off the side of the road or go to a parking lot nearby and collect the sample from.
Thank you.
Josh, let me just stay with you for a moment. So now you have some E. coli data, you have some DNA data that is not doesn't make anybody very happy. Do you have a sense of what next in your, either in Dry Run or in the whole Cedar River watershed as a whole?
So specifically with Dry Run, we're looking at pulling together some community partners to try and utilize this data and have a positive impact with it. Like I said, we've been trying to find out where our bacteria was coming from. So now having this source very useful information, even only being 2 data sets. Like I said, we can utilize this data. So we started pulling together folks that would be a good part of a team. We have the University of Northern Iowa is within our Dry Run Creek watershed, and we have many partners there, you know, not only with the professors and the researchers, but also students there as well. So looking at pulling in some expertise from folks there, also looking at partnering with our local municipalities, our county sanitarian, and trying to get folks around the table to have a discussion on this and what we can utilize this data, how we can try and help develop a plan to target these sources of E. coli and identify the beneficial conservation or the infrastructure that we can implement in key areas to help reduce the source of E. coli. And I guess the ultimate goal is to get Dry Run Creek delisted as an impaired water body for bacteria. So like I said, we're just kind of starting those discussions, but this data is essential for us to have these discussions and develop a plan going forward. And I know, like I said, that's just the Dry Run Creek portion, but I know there's many watershed groups throughout the Cedar River. We have 3 watershed management authorities, which are groups that they get together, you know, voluntarily, representatives from counties, municipalities, soil and water conservation districts, and trying to address water quality issues within those watersheds. And so we have the upper Cedar, the middle Cedar, and the lower Cedar. So the entire Cedar River stretch is covered by watershed management authorities. We also have many water quality improvement projects on the smaller, you know, Huck 12 scale that are tributaries to the Cedar River. And so there is a lot of focus and emphasis on improving water quality here. And this data, you know, is also vital for those watershed groups as well.
That's a good summary, Josh, and a good segue to go back to Mark. Josh is on the maybe the relative front end of trying to make some change, at least in Dry Run, but Mark and Larry and Bill are on the other end, having made some changes, but still pushing at the door. Mark, do you want to pick up the story on where you guys are in Mower County right now with the ordinance and maybe the annexation? But those 2 topics, could you guys discuss?
The current status of the county ordinance is it's been revised after it was accepted in the end of 21. And essentially the revisions closed a couple more loopholes, I guess. And that was actually the major rewrite of the ordinance from previously written in 2014. And the adopted January 12 of 21 with those important revisions. And as I said, they did find a couple more loopholes they wanted to tidy up, and that was done later at the same year. Currently, there's a lot of good progress. I don't have the numbers of the systems put in this year, I guess. We haven't.
I think last year was 100, end of last year was 125. And they would be, of course, just starting this year.
Yeah. We'll get into it.
Yeah. Which was a really good year compared to the 2 previous years because we had so much water. We had 20 inches more rain than we on average 2 years in a row, ballpark. So that was tough to get those systems in. So mostly mound systems.
Yeah. We were pleasantly surprised. We'd been warned by the county engineer and others that installers would be hard to come by. And it seems that isn't the case. When the weather allowed, there were people putting in systems as needed pretty well and pretty quickly. So
Mark,
up to date.
before you leave that topic, could you describe the ad hoc committee that you guys were part of and maybe even go back to your unhappy county commissioners when the media learned about the DNA data, the genetic testing data?
Well, the guilty party's in the crowd here. one of them anyway.
It's not you, John, but
No.
anyway. But no,
I guess the original management plan, Bill and Larry wrote back in 5/17 is when this kind of got started. 10/17, there's a summary described in the project, I think by the same two. And we went looking for some funds to do that testing, genetic testing, as we've said, is expensive, and we ended up with 5,000 from the endowment, from the Izaak Walton League Endowment Fund, gave us the 5,000 to pay for the testing we were asking for. We had results to turn into the county, and that actually happened back in first part of 20, wasn't it? Was it that late?
When, or for what?
For the actual results we were turned over to the county?
Oh, no.
no, that was really, that was the fall of 2018. Or even prior to that, maybe.
Yeah, I think that had to be in summer of 2018.
Yeah, and so, yeah, the Star Tribune came down and they did a front page article on our results, and then we presented to the county commissioners, and the county.
That was February 2019, and John's article was in September of 2018.
Yeah, so John wrote it. John Weiss, he wrote an article. Okay.
So do you have, so did the DNR change, or the state change the rules based on what you found, so that there was more policing's probably not the right word, but more inspection of septic systems? Or
Results of the testing proved to the county commissioners that there was a need to enhance the septic system enforcement and testing. So that's where the ordinance enhancements came into fruition and into effect. And that is what realistically we hope is improving water quality, but we still can't prove that. But we hope to do that.
The ordinance rewrite was primarily, and it was focused on compliance, enhancing compliance. The county, back when I was working, had already adopted some things to get more compliance, but obviously it needed to be done more quickly. So they put more triggers in, so when people got certain permits, they had to have a compliance inspection done. Anyone selling property, and one of the loopholes that Mark was referring to was that they closed up the loophole for selling contract for deed or selling within the family. Now, those systems also have to be inspected, and the ordinance complied with. So that's what the rewrite of the ordinance primarily was to speed up the compliance process.
And it
Thank
took
you.
us, about, after the Star Tribune article, they weren't very happy with this, but it took us about, we asked for an ad hoc committee with the commissioners to start working with them more closely. And we had a new exec at the county level, that Trish Herring, and she was very supportive, and we ran with that. We had about 6 of us members, not all attending the monthly meetings, but 3 to 4 usually out of our chapter would attend, and we would provide input and they would provide feedback to us. So it was going the right direction.
so how big an area and how many defective systems do you think that you uncovered or got fixed because of this?
Well, that was not that's not what we set out to do. We didn't set out.
So you
to
didn't end up with
pinpoint-
those,
No, we identified the areas along the streams. And then basically it's up to the county to find which homes are the culprits, are the problems.
okay,
And so that's what, so they chose compliance through the ordinance to do that rather than going door to door, you know.
They did do some of that door-to-door inspections of those that they should have questioned in their minds that might have been
Oh, okay.
surfacing. So there was some of that, but not a lot realistically.
okay. Thanks for clarifying on that.
I would comment too, 67% of the samples had E. coli contamination, was exceeded the acceptable Minnesota state health standard. So yeah, and Iowa has the same health standard.
You know, if I could comment and maybe ask this question, the royal we get more bent out of shape about the idea that there's human fecal matter in our water than there is hog or chicken or beef or any other animals? I mean, at the end of the day, do we get sick no matter where it's coming from? Or are we just more offended when we know it's our own poop in the water? And therefore, does that trigger more reaction from the public? Do you guys, any of you, all four of you, any comments or thoughts about that?
Well, you know, I worked in environmental health, and yes, human waste, human feces is definitely a more serious problem than animal waste to human health. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't get sick if you get a mouthful of water containing pig manure or cow manure. But we get more diseases from humans than we do from other animals typically. It seems to be changing lately, but so yes. And the other thing is that that's something a little more easily to get a handle on, at least in Mower County or this part of the area where agriculture is, you know, a big business, and it's important to a lot of families. So that's a little bit slower or harder to maybe get some changes made, you know, in the agricultural community. But yes, human waste is considered more of a threat to human health.
Bill, you told me one time, or you wrote to me one time that the DNA, maybe the E. coli, but definitely the DNA data, it stops the squabbles. And Larry, you said something similar to me. And Bill, you just mentioned it, the whole legal handle of E. coli. Could you guys, and Josh too, if you have some insight, can you talk about that a little bit? What do you mean by a legal handle, and what do you mean by stopping the squabbles? What's the strength of that data?
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, you know, from the very beginning, working with the kids, I mentioned doing macroinvertebrates with them when the kick sampling method and all that early on in my, and continue to do that. But well, you know, we collected this data. They're excited about seeing what's in the stream, but you know, we got some problems here. And so doing the E. coli plate sampling, of course, put us in the realm of, okay, going to the commissioners and saying, we have this data here, and we got a problem with septics in this watersheds, because specifically because the genetic testing indicates human and E. coli. So we yeah, so with that, it starts to push the envelope with the powers to be to do something about it. It's never fast enough to get it done, but I think we're still in the game here, and we still need to push. Even I suggested to Bill and Mark, we probably need to go back to Dobbins Creek this summer and check the South Branch and the North Branch and the confluence of those streams, particularly because of potential annexation down the road. So because it's 2018, our data ended, and even though it ended with Bill collecting Dobbins Creek data during that time, E. coli bacteria data then. But so we think that, and we'll likely do that. I have plates in my refrigerator, and we'll probably do maybe 2 or 3 checks, especially if there's any major rain events, and then bring that forward again, because we have communicated with the city engineer's office. We have recently, and also the county engineer's office about moving forward on this annexation. So, but as I mentioned, they're in a bonding bill with the sewage treatment plant for Austin, which would allow for 25% more homes to be on it, or a greater capacity. The other thing that's kind of interesting is in our data, the best place to get clean water is where it comes out of sewage treatment plant in Austin. Some people say you can drink it. I don't know, have you drank it? I don't know. But anyway, it's supposed to be pretty good. They are working on the phosphate as well in upgrading their phosphate.
As Larry said, the MPCA's testing showed the water below the sewage treatment plant was the best in the county.
Yeah, so there's that's the good thing. And of course, the Hormel company has their own system as well as the city. So they work together, but yeah, so
They pre-treat a good share of the required significant issues out of it, don't they, Bill?
Yeah, the treatment plant has, the industrial side, and then and which is primarily Hormel, and then the domestic side. And there's a lot that's taken out by Hormel.
Prior to, and they turn around and sell it, so that works out for them.
and then back in 89 or 88, the Hormel company got fined, and they for pollution, and so they suggested that the money be used for educational purposes. So that's when the whole non-point source water pollution project started, and then kids were coming out field trips and to the nature center doing studies of the water. So, and we had some great hikes back then too, and I won't, Dave would know them, but just wonderful hikes that were participating in that work. So
Chris, are there other questions in your chat box that we haven't gotten to one way or another?
There are a couple that are interesting comments, and maybe I can read those, and maybe your panel can address them. Let's see. I'm going to back up and see what else. Mary Ellen has one of those where she inherited an old system and they didn't have to do an upgrade. And if I remember, Mary Ellen, you're maybe in Wayne County or down southern Iowa somewhere, and you have several questions about if the Amish are exempted. And I don't know that. All I know is that up here, we have a sanitarian who is like right on it. Every time a rural place changes hands, he's out there testing the septic system and making sure that you do a new one. It's almost like he's getting a bonus from the plumbers of the world. But I've had I've had lots of experience with him because I had rental houses, and every single one of them has had to have upgraded septic systems in the last 15 years. So there was another comment, Mary Ellen, did I see one about, oh, the comment about that in other locations that they had tested for COVID in the water, and that it was an easier way to find that people had been exposed or even had COVID because of the testing. So, but not any other.
Chris,
Well, David had
Chris.
one early on about if our water has an impairment other than E. coli that needs to be removed, is there any way we can follow this E. coli effort? And it feels to me like maybe that it was human E. coli was a big key here. And I think maybe they've commented to that effect. But.
Well, yeah, we feel that we found that human waste is, if not the biggest problem, it's the most widespread. We found bacteria in all the streams, but we found human DNA markers in all of them as well, where in quantifiable numbers, whereas cattle, I'm trying to think off the top of my head here, was in about half of the streams or half the sites that we DNA tested, and swine was in 7 of 9 DNA samples. So human, is definitely a big part of the problem, and that's where the county chose to start. Now the SWCD is aware of the work we've done, and they are telling us that they're going to work harder, or they are working to bring feedlots into more compliance, or bring them all into compliance, I guess is what they are really aiming to do. Yeah, and stay that way.
But do we have any type of legal handle on that, the runoff from feedlots? We have some, right? But yeah.
Well, certainly, we have a feedlot inspector who also is head of the, she's in charge of the environmental services, which is doing the septic work as well. Although they've hired a consultant for the septic work, and I know that the SWCD, is doing a lot of the work with the ag community. So I don't think it's that the county is ignoring that part of it.
Chris, do you want to read Gretchen's observation? That would be a pretty nice one to have everyone hear and see.
Sure. So Gretchen Sobel from the UMRI and League of Women Voters up that way, maybe. I love how this project was able to prove that problems were present before this testing. It seems it was easier for elected officials to just say, oh, that's how it is here. We've always sent just our sewage to the ditches and then just keep on resisting change. But this project proved that sewage discharges were indeed causing pollution, and the continued testing held the county's feet to the fire to make change. I think that we all have learned a lot tonight about how that could work for us. I'm looking at a new little pig confinement a half a mile from me, and I'm worried about the pigs. But knowing what the DNA is, and it might be something that we add to our testing kits. Maybe that's a question that I have, Caroline, is how expensive is the DNA testing kit?
Well, so Bill, so the Austin folks to go out of state to find a lab that was willing to work with them, and they found a fabulous lab in Florida. And those, I don't know what you guys paid, but by the time we wrote the grant for the Iowa end of the watershed work last year, they were about $700 or $800 a test. And the lab, this would have been that was the second year we worked with them, were pretty tickled about our being with them. And they actually came in as a partner, and they gave us fabulous rate reduction. And that rate reduction became even more in the course of our work together. So it turned out to be, I can't remember, but roughly $600 a test. I can't remember exactly. And that $600 covered the three sources that we wanted to test in Iowa last year: human, pig, and beef, cows. So it's pretty pricey. And so you can see why Josh and his colleagues in Iowa, and then the Austin folks a few years ago, had to be as careful as they could, and that the E. coli count at a given site was high enough to be assured that the DNA lab could get a viable and rigorous outcome. And in fact, the lab last year sometimes called us back and said, the E. coli, the reading is just, it's not quite solid enough. And they would happily charge us to do a DNA test on it, but they were very questionable about the validity of it. And so we would cancel the test, and they charged us a small fee for that early processing, but they didn't charge us the full DNA testing fee, which I thought was really decent. But it really underlined how important it is that you do the E. coli part first, because that tells you that you have a threshold of E. coli from somebody, from somewhere, some two-legged or four-legged animal is putting E. coli in that piece of water at that moment. And if it's high enough, then the genetic testing lab has a much better chance of putting your $600 or $700 or $900 test to good effect.
Thank you. Very helpful.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We learned that early on. It was, there was a learning curve, and our first two samples that we took, which was during a dry period, didn't yield any results. And so we learned quickly that we needed, high levels of bacteria in there. And that's what Josh was facing last year. Unfortunately, they got kind of a late start in a very dry summer.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to mention that our funding was through the UMRI, Upper Mississippi River Initiative of the Izaak Walton League, Minnesota division. Don Arnosti was our original project manager. Dave Zentner is now in charge of the Upper Mississippi River project. And we did get a $10,000 grant to help with our work from the national.
With the Iowa work.
With the Iowa.
Yeah.
We did 5 for the Minnesota work.
And so that's the money that we passed on to Iowa. But our initial funding, and I can't remember just what it was through the Izaak Walton League.
Endowment.
Well, the endowment was the second one, right?
No, that's both.
Or were they both?
Yeah.
Okay. And so it wasn't a cheap project, and we had to keep track of everything.
Yeah, when they asked us to do the project in the winter, or before winter, I believe it was, fall, they weren't assured that they were going to get the McKnight Foundation grant, but they were confident. And so they asked us to be the pilot for that project. So like I said, well, sounds okay. So anyway, and I would like to make a comment too. There was a lot of passion here and within our chapter, you know, the technicalities we're talking about is I mean, I can figure it out. And if I needed to ask someone, I'd ask questions about, and we have developed a curriculum related to this with a genetic testing protocol as well as the E. coli plate sampling protocol. So, and it's been revised, and after we're training with Iowa, we had, you know, we're some of the things about the blank samples and duplicate samples were, but Bill had it right, I didn't. So, so anyway, so we worked together, but I think, you know, it's definitely, I mean, they say Austin, but we'd like to see more teams out there. We don't feel like we're any type of elite group. We just, I think the key is that we have the passion to have clean water, not just for us, but for the next generation. And so, and we did run into issues with, we recommended, our chapter recommended on the Cedar River not to swim in it, which kind of, it's part of a recreational river. But, you know, we had a little debate on that locally, but so not to swim, but certainly you can kayak or canoe or whatever. But if you fall in, you know, you want to take a shower not too long after. So and once in the canoe race with my son, I did an overzealous draw on the front end, and I went in head first. I shouldn't, and I got my head out real quick anyway. So knowing what I knew, but anyway, that's another story.
So maybe one last wrap-up question, Carolyn, and I'll turn it to you, okay? Mary Ellen has a really good question, and I'm curious too. Will the study continue? And how much money do you think it would take to make even more change?
Well, there's no plans for you know, our work to continue on the river, but you know, if change doesn't come, Ike's in the future and hopefully others would demand that something be done. But no, we feel that we've laid a foundation, and there's still work that the county has to do, and we're here to try to see that they continue with it.
Good. Hold their feet to the fire.
What about Josh? I think Josh is on a different end of the
Yes.
progress so far. What's your answer, Josh?
Well, you know, this is definitely something we would like to continue. You know, when I first started as a watershed coordinator and back in 2015 and first heard about microbial source tracking, it was something we were very interested in. So I know I think I submitted a couple grant applications, you know, to state or federal agencies, and wasn't successful with getting funding. So like I said, you know, this definitely fell into our lap, and getting some of the data, I guess, you know, has us very interested in what, you know, reinforcing that with more data, collecting more sites, you know, doing it more frequently. So I know I'm sure that'll probably be part of our efforts, is looking at how do we get more data, and what partners do we need to bring to the table to, you know, overcome the expensive cost for this analysis. So I think, yeah, pulling more folks and groups around the table will help us achieve that. And then, yeah, definitely utilizing the data we collect to have positive change in our watersheds and in our communities will be a very big goal for us.
Josh, can I ask a question? What about the rest of like the group that you work with, your direct people above you? Are they in favor of doing this too? Or are you kind of doing this on the side as a volunteer? I know you're doing this on the side outside of your job too.
Well, and yep, and I guess there definitely is overlap. Bacteria isn't the primary impairment of the Dry Run Creek watershed. The Watershed Improvement Project does target managing stormwater to address our biological impairments that we received first. So like I said, yeah, this bacterial work is kind of supplementary or complementary to our efforts there as well. But yes, I would say between our Black Hawk Soil and Water Conservation District commissioners, the Dry Run Creek Advisory Board, and other community partners, they are very supportive of this and do recognize the value that this data and our partnership with the Izaak Walton League has provided us.
Oh, that's great to know. Thank you.
Is there any ICE chapter that would come into play here for you, provide support? I was just thinking about dollars coming from national or, for support. Is there any ICE chapters that say, yeah, we're behind you 100%, and we'll throw some money in maybe, and then maybe go for some money with endowment or something anyway, so.
We're working on that. Caroline's a lot of help.
Okay.
Right. I'd say that it's 8:15 and time for my supper at least. Josh, let me say on behalf of all of us, thank you to Josh Balk and to Mark Owens and Larry Dolphin and Bill Buckley for giving us their pretty interesting and insightful and inspiring story tonight about water quality that might have a good end, is so far. Anyway, thank you very much, all four of you, for joining us, and to the rest of you for hanging in. I know, Christine, can you talk about it being recorded and how folks can get a copy of this if they need or want?
Yes, absolutely. After this segment, I'll get a Zoom and recording, and I will upload that to YouTube, and I will send it out to all the people who registered this evening. And we're also going to send you the PDF report that the Mower County did with and the Austin chapter that talks about this study. So you'll have a PDF too.
It's
One
great.
last-
Report.
One last thing too is that, I have 50 plates in the refrigerator, and, we're still open to training a team or two teams, whatever, just so it's out there. Maybe it's not this year, but maybe it's next year. But they're sitting in the refrigerator. Nancy's always asking me when are you going to use those? So anyway, so.
Well, we can use them down here. I have the incubator. I do have
Yeah.
one of the incubators.
Yeah. Gotta have a team to go with them though, so.
Right.
So,
I think we're good, right, everybody? Are we all done?
Yeah,
I think so.
And thank you,
all four of you.
everybody, for taking time. We have
Yep.
Susan Heathcote. We had about 12 people at the Izaak Walton League on the call, and then it dwindled down, and they finally got off. So we did have some additional people watching, and thank you, Susan, for coming on, and Z and everybody else. And thanks, Josh.
Good night,
And
everyone.
Chris,
It's been a
thank
pleasure.
you.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Good night.
Good
night,
night.
Bob Rye.
Okay, gratitude.
Good night.
Bye-bye.